Imagine a phone ringing in a dimly lit hotel room in Rome. It is May 2004. On one end of the line is a man whose name makes Italian referees sweat through their structural blazers. On the other end is the head of the referee selection committee. The voice on the phone does not request, it commands.
For the match against Messina, I want Pierluigi Collina. Actually, no, not Collina. He's too independent. Give us someone who knows how to listen.
This was the secret soundtrack to the most dominant, elegant, and terrifyingly efficient football machine in Europe. This was Juventus, the old lady of Italian football, a club draped in pristine white and stark black, owned by the Agnelli family, the industrial royalty who essentially built modern Italy through the Fiat motoring empire. To the world, Juventus was Alessandro Del Piero curling a breathtaking shot into the top corner. It was Zlatan Ibrahimovic terrorizing defenders. It was Gianluigi Buffon defying gravity. But behind the velvet curtain, the script of the entire Italian league was being written by a single man with a Swiss SIM card and a drawer full of burner phones. His name was Luciano Moggi. And he didn't just want Juventus to win. He wanted to own the very air the opposition breathed. To understand how deep the rot went, you have to understand what Italy was in the early 2000s. Serie A wasn't just a football league. It was the undisputed center of the sporting universe. It was the Seven Sisters: Juventus, AC Milan, Inter, Roma, Lazio, Parma, and Fiorentina, waging a weekly multi-million-dollar war for cultural supremacy. And at the absolute peak of this ecosystem sat Juventus. In Italy, there is an old saying, when Fiat coughs, Italy catches a cold. The Agnelli family didn't just own a football club. They owned newspapers, factories, insurance giants, and political influence. Juventus was the sporting manifestation of Italian capitalism. They possessed an institutional gravity. If you were a rising star in Italy, you didn't just dream of playing for Juventus, you accepted it as an inevitability. To manage this empire on the pitch, the Agnellis employed the Triad, a trio of hyper-competent executives led by general manager Luciano Moggi. Moggi was a former railway station worker who had climbed his way through the scouting ranks of Italian football. He was brilliant, fiercely loyal, and utterly Machiavellian. Under his watch, Juventus didn't just build a team, they built an ecosystem of absolute compliance. Moggi understood a fundamental truth about football. Matches aren't won merely through the 90 minutes on the pitch. They are won by controlling the variables before the players even line up in the tunnel. By 2005, opposition managers began to notice a bizarre recurring pattern. It wasn't that Juventus was receiving blatant, outrageously fake penalties every week. That would be too obvious, too clumsy for a man of Moggi's intellect. No, it was far more subtle. It was psychological warfare. If an opposing team's star striker was playing Juventus the following week, he would mysteriously receive a highly questionable yellow card in his current match, triggering an automatic suspension. If an assistant referee made a borderline offside call against Juventus, his career would suddenly stall. He would find himself demoted to refereeing Serie B matches in the freezing rain of November, his top-flight ambitions quietly executed. Moggi had created what prosecutors later termed the Sistema Moggi, a dark web of influence that dictated the fate of every referee, linesman, and sports journalist in the country. He bought dozens of foreign SIM cards from Switzerland and distributed them to key referee designators. Why? Because Italian police could not legally wiretap Swiss networks. On these secret lines, Moggi didn't just influence referee appointments, he constructed them. He would call the designators, and openly berate them if an independent referee dared to call a fair game against his team. In one infamous instance, after Juventus lost a match to Regina due to some controversial refereeing decisions, Moggi and the Juventus operational manager literally cornered the referee, Gianluca Paparesta, in the stadium dressing rooms. Moggi screamed at him, cursed his lineage, and then, according to early investigative reports, physically locked the referee inside the changing room, pocketed the key, and drove back to Turin, leaving the match official trapped in the dark. This wasn't just sporting arrogance. This was a man who felt entirely untouchable by the laws of the state. But the problem with building a panopticon is that eventually someone else starts watching you. In 2006, as the Italian national team was preparing for the World Cup in Germany, a completely separate criminal investigation into a sports doping agency accidentally stumbled upon intercepted phone lines. The prosecutors listened, transfixed, as hundreds of hours of Luciano Moggi's voice filled their headphones. The transcripts leaked to the Italian press in May 2006. The headlines exploded like a coordinated artillery strike across the peninsula. The beautiful game was exposed as a hollow theatre. The public read the actual words of Moggi, boasting about how he had locked a referee in a room. They read about how he had engineered the bookings of rival players. They realized that the Scudettos, the league titles they had wept over, celebrated, and tattooed onto their skin, had been carefully curated in hotel lobbies and over Swiss cellular networks. The scandal was dubbed Calciopoli. The timing was poetic and agonizing. Italy's World Cup squad was absolutely packed with Juventus players. Gianluigi Buffon, Fabio Cannavaro, Alessandro Del Piero, Mauro Camoranesi, the spine of the national team, belonged to the club at the absolute center of the criminal web. While the players fought their way through the knockout stages in Germany, back home, the sports tribunals were sharpening the guillotines. On July 9, 2006, Fabio Cannavaro lifted the World Cup trophy into the Berlin sky. Italy were champions of the world. But just 5 days later, the verdict dropped like a concrete block. Juventus was stripped of their 2005 and 2006 Serie A titles. Their historic records were systematically erased from the ledger of Italian football. And for the first time in their entire 109-year history, the old lady was violently banished. Relegated to the purgatory of Serie B, the image remains burned into the collective memory of football fans. Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Patrick Vieira fleeing Turin to sign for rivals, while icons like Del Piero, Buffon and Pavel Nedved stayed, choosing to play on muddy, half-empty pitches in the second division out of sheer loyalty to the shirt. Juventus served their time. They won Serie B in a single season, returned to the top flight, built a magnificent new stadium, and eventually won 9 consecutive league titles in the 2000s. On paper, they recovered. But the damage to the soul of Italian football was permanent. To this day, if you walk into the Allianz Stadium in Turin, you will see the numbers 38 and 36 proudly displayed on the walls, the club's official count of the league titles they believe they won on the pitch. They refuse to accept the state's erasure of their history. They argue that Moggi was simply doing what every other club executive was doing at the time, surviving in a ruthless, compromised system. They point out that AC Milan, Lazio and Fiorentina were also implicated and penalized, though none as severely as Juventus. But the question remains, casting a long, dark shadow over a century of footballing glory. Did Juventus actually steal a century of Italian football? Or were they simply the only ones sophisticated enough to turn the systemic corruption of an entire country into a beautifully executed science? Every time a referee blows a questionable whistle in Turin, the stadium holds its breath. Because in Italy, the ghosts of Luciano Moggi's burner phones never truly stopped ringing.